We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Amud Beis in Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 30b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara asked what exactly is the machlokas between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Nosson. Again, the Tanna Kama says that when they're testifying, they have to testify together. And Rabbi Nosson says they can testify. One can testify on one day and the other can testify the next day. And the Gemara suggests that the machlokas might be within the interpretation of the pasuk. The pasuk talks about the person who saw testimony but then doesn't come forth and actually testify. And the Gemara explains with the Kuli Alma in both the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Nosson, ki Rabbanan de pligi oled Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. They both hold like the Rabbanan who argue on Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. Rashi explains, ki Rabbanan de pligi ad Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha svira lahu. They both hold like the Rabbanan. The Amri bo'inon sheyiru shnaim ke'echad. The Rabbanan say that in terms of what they see, they have to see the testimony together. V'alfinan taima mivahu eid delichsi kechad. They learned that from the pasuk. V'gabe hagada pligi tanoi deseifa ba'akushe hagada l'riyah. And the whole machlokus between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Nosson is, do we compare the testimony to actually seeing what you're testifying about? Because it talks about seeing and it talks about testifying in the same pasuk. That's the pasuk that the Gemara quoted on the previous summit. So again, back in the Gemara, both the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Nosson agree with the Rabbanan who argue on Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. And the machlokus is whether we compare the testifying to the Re'iyah, to seeing the testimony. Mar Savar Makshin and Haggadah l'Re'iyah, one says that we do compare, Umar Savar Lo Makshin, and one says that we do not compare. And so again, that's why Rabbi Nosson who says we do not compare, says that they do not have to testify at the same time, whereas the Rabbanan disagree, they say we do compare, and therefore they do have to testify at the same time. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Shimon ben Elyakim have mishtaked oled Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina lemismechei. Rabbi Shimon ben Elyakim, he was trying to get smicha for Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina, v'lo kamistayim milsa, but he was not successful. Yom Echad, one day, have a Yosef Kameid Rabbi Yochanan, he was sitting before Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Lui said to them, Miko de Yoda halachik Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha olo. Does somebody here know whether or not the halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha or not? Again, this was the machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha. The Rabbanan said that you have to see the testimony, that which you're testifying about, you have to see it together. The two Eidim have to see it together. And Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha said they do not have to see it together. And the question is whether the halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha or not. Amar lei Rabbi Shimon ben Elyakim. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elyakim said to him, he said to Rabbi Yochanan, Dein Yada, this person knows. And he was referring to the fact that Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina, he said he knows the answer to this question. Amar lei Me'ezah. So he said to him, say, who do we follow? Who's the halacha like? Amar lei said to him, Lismechei Mar, first, Lismechei Mar Bereisha, first, the master of Yochanan should give him smicha, and then he will say the answer. Meaning then Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina will say who we paskin like. So Samche, so he gave him smicha. Amar lei said to him, B'ni emor li keitza shamata, now my son, tell me what you heard. Amar lei said to him, Kach shamati, this is what I heard. Shemod Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, Rabbi Nosson, Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, that he agrees with Rabbi Nosson. Meaning to say, Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, who says that the Eidim don't have to see it at the same time, he admits to Rabbi Nosson also that they don't have to testify at the same time. Amar, so Rabbi Yochanan said, Lazehu tzrachti, did I need Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina for this? Hashta, uma'ikor re'iyah bahadei hadadi. If, when it comes to actually seeing what they're testifying about, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha lo ba'ina, Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha says they don't need to see it together. Hagadami boy, when they're actually testifying, we even need to say that. That's obvious that they don't need to testify together. But Amar lei said to him, Hoel v'alisa lo teir, but since you've already been raised up, you've already been given smicha, you're not going to go back down again. Amar Rabbi Zera says, Shema Amino, we see from here, Gavra Rabba Kavan the Samach Samach, when it comes to a great person, once the smicha is given, the smicha is given. And the Gemara continues, Amar Reb Chia bar Ravin, Amar Rav, Reb Chia bar Ravin says that Rav says, Halacha, Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, bein bekarkos, bein b'metaltalin. The halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, whether we're talking about land, whether we're talking about movable objects. Ula Amar Ula says, Halacha Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha bekarkos. The halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha by karka, by land, avalo b'metaltalin, but not by movable objects. And Rashi explains, again, the halacha is like Rabbi Yoshua ben Karcha, that they don't have to see what they're testifying about at the same time. Bein bekarkos, whether we're talking about land, ze omer b'fanai hodelo, shakarka ze shalo. This one says that he admitted in front of me that the land belonged to that person. V'ze omer af b'fanai hodelo, and the other person says he admitted to me, at a different time. Bein b'metaltalin, the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha by movable objects as well. Ze omer b'fanai hilveyu mana, this one says in front of me he lent a mana. V'ze omer b'fanai hilveyu mana, the other one says in front of me he lent a mana. V'yaf al pida mana to come masid high, lo masid high, even though they're testifying about different manas, mikol makom tarvayu masadi, shechayiv lo mana, nevertheless they join together, because they're both testifying that he's chayiv to a mana. Halacha kimoso bekarkos, and the other opinion is no, the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha by land, shemutal hakarga befonenu, because that land is right in front of us. It has to be the same piece of land. Ushnei amid and land, they're both testifying about it. Avalo b'metaltalin, but by metaltalin, movable objects, you can't say that. De'ein edus shleima lo al zeh v'lo al zeh. Again, it's a separate money. It's a different money. You don't have a full edus on this one. You don't have a full edus on the other one. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Abaya, Abaya said back to him, Halacha, if you're saying the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, by karka, by land, mechlal de pligi, that would imply that they're arguing by land, but that's not true. Ve'amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, but Rabbi Abba said that Rav Huna says that Rav says, Modim chachamim le Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, be'edus karka, that the chachamim agree with Rabbi Yeshua when it comes to land. There they don't have to see it at the exact same time. V'tani Ravidi bar Avin, b'nizikin and devei karna, and it was also taught, Ravidi bar Avin taught in the section on Nizikin of Beikarna, Modin Chacham Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, that the Chachamim admit they agree with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, Be'edus Bechor, when we're talking about testifying on a Bechor, an animal that's the firstborn, Uve'edus Karka, and testifying on land, Uve'edus Chazaka, and testifying on Chazaka, which is the 3-year Chazaka that someone makes by land, V'chein Shebeben V'Shebebas, and also testifying about a son and daughter. We'll see Rashi in a moment, but the point is, again, we see by Karka the Chachamim agree. And the Gemara says, Gavra Karamis, you're trying to say a contradiction between various Amoraim. It could be they argue. Mar Savar Pligi, one master says that they argue by land, Umar Savar Lo Pligi, and the other one says they don't argue. And Rashi explains, Be'edus Bechor, by testimony of the firstborn, Tanan bebechoros, we learned in the Mishnah in Bechoros, Kol mumin haru'uyin lavo bidei adam, any mumin, any blemishes which could come by a person, that a person could have created that blemish on the animal, Roem Kohanim, Ein Nemonin Lomar Me'elov Nafal Bo Mum Zeh. If you have shepherds that are also Kohanim, they're not believed to say that it happened on its own. Because nowadays, the Kohanim, there's actually a suspicion that they might put those mumin, those blemishes on the firstborn animals on purpose, because that allows them to be shechted. And therefore, if he's going to bring a bechor and he wants to show it to the chacham to be matir it, he needs to have 2 witnesses with him, that this happened on its own, that he didn't purposely put the mum there. For example, if he would bring 1 witness on this particular mum and then another witness on a different mum, so we're saying there that would also be mitzvah if they could join together. You don't have to be that they're testifying on the exact same thing when it comes to Eidus Bechor. Uve'edus Chazaka, same thing by Eidus Chazaka. Ze omer b'fanai achla shalosh shanim rishonos shel Shemitah. Let's say, for example, one witness says, I saw the first 3 years of the Shemitah cycle, he made a Chazaka. Ze omer b'fanai achla shalosh shanim achronos. And the other one says, I saw in the latter years he made a Chazaka of that Shemitah cycle. Mitzdarfi, they could join together even though they're testifying about different years. Da'achad karka mesadi chazaka mal yosef, because it's all on one piece of land that they're saying there was a chazaka. V'chein linyan shtei saro shebeben v'shebebas. When we're talking about the son and daughter, we're talking about testifying that they're adults, that they have the 2 hairs that indicate adulthood. And the point is that the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha in all of these cases. V'chi pligi, and when do they argue with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha? That's b'halvoas mona pligi. That would be by like a loan. Mishum delav achad mona kamasadi, because then they're not testifying on the same mona, on the same money. Gavra, and then the Gemara said, are you trying to ask a contradiction rather, between Amoraim, Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Idi, Adaula? Could be that they actually argue in terms of what the scope of the machlokes actually is. And the Gemara continues, Mai v'chein shebeben v'shebebas. What does it mean that also by testimony regarding the son and the daughter, the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha? Ileim, if you're going to say, it means as follows: Echad omer achas begabo, v'echad omer achas bekreisa. One witness testifies that there's a hair on her back, and the other one testifies that there's a hair on her front. Hai chatzi dover v'chatzi edus. So that would be not only chatzi edus, it would also be chatzi dover. And Rashi explains chatzi dover v'chatzi edus. Eid echad hu chatzi edus. One witness is considered chatzi chatzi edus. That's half edus. And seir achas hu chatzi davar. And if he testifies there's just one hair, that would just be chatzi davar. The person needs 2 hairs in order to be considered an adult. And so therefore that cannot be the situation. And so the Gemara says, Elo echad omer shtayim begabo. Actually the case is as follows. One of the witnesses says there are 2 hairs on her back. V'echad omer shtayim bekreis. And the other one says there are 2 on the front. And therefore each one is testifying that this person is an adult, but you have a situation where they're not testifying about the exact same hairs. Rashi says, the case over there is, if the case is that in that fashion, they're both testifying that she actually is an adult. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yosef says, Ano amina mishmei de'ula, halacha Rav Yoshua ben Karcha. I say in the name of Ula that the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, bein bekarkos, bein bemetaltalin, whether we're talking about land or metaltalin, movable objects. For Rabbanan da'asu mimechuza amri, and the Rabbanan who come from Mechuza, they say, Amar Rabbi Zera mishmei derav, that Rabbi Zera says in the name of Rav, bekarkos, in the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha by land, avolo bemetaltalin, but not by movable objects. And the Gemara says, Rav l'taimi, this is Rav following his opinion. D'yomar Rav, because Rav says, Hoda achar hoda, hoda achar halva mitzdarfi. If you're talking about an admission following an admission, or an admission following the loan, that there the Edom do join together. But halva achar halva, but if it's a loan following a loan, we'll see Rashi in a moment, halva achar hoda, or let's say it's a loan after an admission, lo mitzdarfi. So there they do not join together. And Rashi explains, Bekarkos avalo b'metaltalin, by land the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, but not metaltalin. Halacha kamoso, again the halacha is like him, delo, but inan dechazu tarvayu kechad bekarkos. By land, you don't need that they see it at the same time. Mishon dechimisadi bevei dina, because when they testify in court, tarvayu yodi, they both know the achad milsa misadi, that they're testifying about the same matter. Bekarina be v'hued, and we refer to that as v'hued of the pasuk. V'yafagav devashaita dechazi lo yod achad bechad, even though at the moment he actually saw it, one witness didn't know about the other witness, still we say that that's good testimony. Avalo b'metaltalin, but that's not true by movable objects. Techimisadi kamon lav achad mona mesadi, because when they testify in front of us, it's not on the same mona. And Rav Diyamar avalo b'metaltalin, Rav who says that again by metaltalin we don't paskin like Rav Yeshua ben Karcha, mishum de lav achad mona mesadi, because they're not testifying about the same mona. That's l'taime, is following his reasoning. Da'amar Rav hoda achar hoda, because Rav says, let's say you have admission following an admission, meaning Ze omer b'fanai hodolo almona be'echad b'Shabbos. Let's say this witness says, in front of me, he admitted about this mona on Sunday. V'ze omer b'fanai hodolo alo b'sheni b'Shabbos. And this one says, he admitted to me on Monday. Or hoda achar halvor. Let's say you have an admission following the loan, meaning Ze omer b'fanai hilveyu mona be'echad b'Shabbos. This one says, in front of me, I saw the loan on Sunday. V'ze omer b'fanai hodolo mona b'sheni b'Shabbos. And this one says, there was an admission to the loan to me in front of me on Monday. Mitzdarfi. So there they join together. Why? Because there already, we can say they're talking about the exact same loan. These two witnesses, even though they saw different events, but they're talking about the same loan. But halva achar hoda, but let's say, for example, one witness says he saw a loan following the other witness saying there was an admission, so clearly the admission has to be made after the loan, not before the loan. So mona achrinu, that's a different mona, that's a different loan. V'lo mitzdarfi, those Edom don't join together. Afagav de tarvayu amri shechayev lo mona, even though they're both saying he owes him a money, but it's not the same money. Or hoda achar hoda nami, or let's say you have a situation of hoda achar hoda, admission following admission, because dilma money de odi le kamehai lav hainu money de odi le kamehai. We don't know that they're admitting to the same money. And the Gemara continues, Ashkechei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak le Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, he found Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua. Amarle said to him, Ma'ishna halva achar halva. What's the difference? Let's say a situation where they testify, one says the loan's on Sunday, the other on Monday. The low, there we say they don't join together. The money, the kachazi high, lo kachazi high, because it's on the money that this one saw is not the same money the other one saw. But hoda achar hoda nami, we should say the same thing by an admission following an admission. Amona de kamod de kami high, lo mo de kami high. On the money which he's admitting in front of this one, maybe it's not the same money he's admitting in front of the other one. And the Gemara continues, Rav Huna answers him, Da'amar leila hai basra, that when the person is admitting, he says to that later witness, this mana that I'm admitting to you about, I already admitted about it to this other person. So now we know that it's the same mana. But the Gemara still says, Akati still, Basro Yoda, Kamolo Yoda. So the later witness will know that there are two witnesses, that it's the same mana. But that earlier witness has no idea. And the Gemara says, the Hadar Azil Amar Leila Kamab. No, the person then goes to that first witness and he says, Haimona do le kamach, or do le nami kame ploni. He says that same mana again that I admitted to you, I admitted in front of so and so, and with that happening, those two witnesses now they know that it's the same mana, and they therefore can join together. And the Gemara continues on Marley, so he said back to him, Tanuach daitcha shesnachta es daiti. Says your mind should be at rest because you've put my mind at rest, meaning to say you've answered the question. But the Gemara continues, Amarle, he said back to him, why is it at rest? I haven't actually fully answered the question. The Rava v'Tamer Rav Sheshes, because Rava and some say Rav Sheshes, Shada Bonarga, they actually threw an X at this answer. Lav Hainu Hoda Achar Halva, wouldn't that be the same thing as Hoda Achar Halva? In other words, if that's the situation, then it's a repeat of the same case. And Rashi explains, Lav Hainu Hoda Achar Halva, wouldn't that now be the same as the case where one witness testifies an admission that came after the loan, meaning once we're now saying that it's required that one witness knows about the other witness, that's going to have to be the same scenario when you have one witness testifying about an admission that took place after the loan. They have to know about each other, and now essentially you're repeating the same basic case. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Lei, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said back to him, Hainu deshmiya li alaychu, that's what I heard about you, to ramisu dikli, that you knock down palm trees, v'zakfisu luhu, and then you stand them back up, meaning after you have an answer to a question, you then knock it down with another question. And the Gemara continues, Nahardoi Amri Nahardoi, they say, Bein Hoda Achar Hoda, Bein Hoda Achar Halva, Bein Halva Achar Halva, Bein Halva Achar Hoda, Mitzdarfus, in all scenarios, whether it's an admission after an admission after a loan after a loan, or a loan after an admission, in all of those cases, those two witnesses are able to join together. And the Gemara says, Kaman, who would that follow? Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha. That means we're paskening like Rabbi Yehoshua ben Karcha, that again, they don't have to see the exact same thing in order to join together as witnesses. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Yehuda says, Eidus ha'macheshes zu esu b'vdikos, let's say you have testimony that's contradicted when they examine the witnesses, ksheira b'dinei mamanis, we would allow that when it comes to monetary cases, there could be some contradiction in terms of the details of the testimony. And the Gemara continues and explains, Amar Rava says, Mistavra milsei de Rav Yehuda, it makes sense what Rav Yehuda is saying, B'echad omer ba'arniki shchora, v'echad omer ba'arniki levana. For example, let's say one witness says that the purse was black, and the other witness says that the purse was white. That's a small detail. That kind of contradiction will not be considered relevant. If one says that it was a mana of black coins and the other one says it was a mana of white coins, that's already directly related to the money of the case. Ein mitzdarfen, so in that case, they do not join together. But the Gemara says if that's what it means, va'arniki shechora b'dinei nefashos lo, but that would mean that by capital cases, let's say they mix up the color of the purse, a black purse or a white purse, apparently that would not be considered good testimony because we're more strict when it comes to situations of dinei nefashos. But the Gemara says that's not true. V'amar Rav Chisda bar Rav Chisda said, Echad omer b'sayif hargo v'echad omer ba'ariran hargo. If one of them says that the killing was done with a sword and the other one says it was done with another weapon called an ariran, ein zeh nachon, that's not going to be good testimony. But echad omer kelev shchorim, but in a situation of a capital case, if one of them says that the person's garments were black, v'echad omer kelev levanim, and the other one says that the garments were white, hareza nachon, and that's perfectly good testimony. And so therefore you see by arniki shechora, that would be good by dinei nefashos as well. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph.